This is the Iron Sharpens Iron movement, sharing insights into the power of people-centric leading.
Hi, this is Jim, and today we welcome to our tribe the founder of Create Your Own Podcast, which studies the highest performers in the world. He studied literature at Oxford University, specializes in using podcasting and the new media to create celebrity, and was ranked number 1 in iTunes New and number 78 in iTunes Top 100. He was named the number 1 podcast to listen to by Inc. magazine in 2019, as well as being named a top influencer by Forbes. After his success in podcasting, him and his wife has founded the Command Your Brand to help entrepreneurs get their message out by appearing as guests on podcasts. This is Jeremy Slate. Iron Sharpens Iron movement is brought to you by N2 Growth, a leader in executive search, leadership development, and talent management. We find and develop the world's best leaders. Learn more about our practice by visiting us at n2growth.com or click on the link in the show notes of this podcast. Jeremy, thank you for joining the Iron Sharpens Iron movement. I know our tribe of listeners are going to get a lot out of this. You know, one of the biggest things that we look for is finding interesting and intriguing people, and you are one of them. So welcome to the show.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me, and I'm really excited to share some value with your audience today, man.
Yeah, I've got a list of questions, and I'm just dying to dive into them for sure. But I'm gonna let everybody know something that was interesting. When I reached out to you, and you replied back, you were like, "Hey, I love the name Iron Sharpens Iron." And one of the things that I think resonated with you is because one of your favorite bodybuilders is Dave Draper.
Yeah, the blonde bomber, man.
and his book is called Brother Iron, Sister Steel.
100%.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Just out of curiosity, what does that mean to you?
Gosh, I think it's really that, in a lot of ways, we have the idea to control our own lives and our own destinies, and we have a lot of the tools that we need. But sometimes it's going to take some really good, training of ourselves and so a really good forming of ourselves, because, if you want to be steel, man, the only thing that can really mold that is, really good fire and a good furnace, or, steel in general.
Amen to that. I love that. That's why, I love the name of the podcast, because I totally agree. It's exactly right. I think it takes others to critically think, to push you beyond your boundaries, all of those kind of things. It's that forcing function, the forging of steel and steel that really makes the sword sharp. So I appreciate that perspective. So, we've read the bio. We know how much, you are an influencer in the podcast world, and really kind of your focus on that PR portion of it and all of that. But what attracted me most to you, Jeremy, is we spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about what are the competencies, what are the traits, what are things leaders should be thinking of, not to lead necessarily today, but in the future. And in particular, kind of that human-centric focus of what it takes to lead in the fourth industrial revolution and to just be successful out there in life. And one of those points is we talk about communication and what is communication, what's collaboration, what's effective messaging, all of those kind of things. And I think you've got a very unique perspective on, I'll be honest with you, Jeremy, I think when I speak to the audience, I'm probably thinking, and most are envisioning when I'm, being in front of a town hall and talking to your people and all of that stuff. When I say effective communications to you, what do you imagine?
Honestly, because here's the thing, right? Like, even if you're talking to a whole group of people, like, communication is still a one-on-one thing, right? Like, I'm a terminal, you're a terminal, and message, transfers across that. So that's the thing you have to consider. Like, even when you're talking to a big group, man, like, one of the things I do on stage is I pick a person in the audience, and that's the person I'm talking to. I don't know if they know. I don't know if they know that looking back at me, but you really to really impact. You have to be able to select that person you're communicating to, right? And it's the way you personalize your conversations. It's the way you're able to really connect with people, because oftentimes when you just kind of spread that energy out so far, you're not communicating. So to me, it's first and foremost like deciding to communicate to one person. And, when you do that, you can kind of amplify out from there. but it's impacting somebody with the message at the receipt point. Because I think often, and you've probably seen this too, right? Like somebody gives you an order, but they're like not really directing it to you, or you're not sure if they're directing it to the wall or like kind of where it's going. And they think it's a communication, but unless you're receiving it, man, it's not a communication. And that's what you have to think. It's like you have the intention to put that communication across, you have their attention to receive it, and you've decided what person that's going to. So that's real communication.
Real communication. And do you think, talk to me about in today's and in the future, where are some of the most functional ways that someone can effectively communicate? What forms of media?
I think honestly, the biggest and probably only one I would focus on right now is the one we're doing right now, and that's podcasts. Because I do think it allows you to, form a lot of interesting relationships with people you typically wouldn't think you would get the time of day with. Like I've been able to network with some incredible people because I've spoken to them on the podcast. And also from a listener standpoint, like somebody's, your podcast is, anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes. And somebody's spending that amount of time with you. Like that's incredible, because Apple took a look at their beta stats and they said, hey, people are sticking around for 80-90% of these things. So how many other places, like even when you go to an event, right? Like somebody's not listening to the whole thing. They got to go to the bathroom at some point or something. So you're losing their attention. When you have them on a podcast that you're in their ears, because they're probably in earbuds or headphones or whatever, and you're catching them while they're at the gym and they're totally focused on you, or while they're at work, and you hope they're focused a little bit on their work, but you have somebody's attention to a level that is just not like any other medium. But then it's also relationship building, because they understand you as a person, they get to like you, and it creates that know, like, and trust factor. So they're more receptive for a message when you're going to put it across that communication line.
I love that. And so do you believe that is there a space in podcasting for almost anyone?
I would believe so. But the thing you have to really think about is what's unique about your message. I think very, very oftentimes people, they try to copy other people and they're like, oh, I'm just going to do what, James does, or I'm just going to do what Grant Cardone does, or just do what Gary Vee does. And it's like, well, then why would people come to you? Like, you're not going to stand out. And that's the thing you really have to consider. You have to have a unique viewpoint about your message that you're putting out. And then it's time to consider a podcast. But if you don't have a unique viewpoint, I really wouldn't recommend starting, because you're going to quit pretty early in that process, because there's no reason for people to come to you over anybody else.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I will tell you, from a relative newbie podcaster, and someone, I will admit less than, I've only listened to podcasts from the last 3 years till now. So it hasn't been a part of my core life. And one of the things that I realized, like when I first started considering doing this podcast, I'm a leadership guy. So I was just like, leadership in air quotes. That's such a huge array of topics just in itself. Leadership.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right? And so I finally focused it down to the core thing that I do believe the most in and I'm passionate about, which is human-centric leading, finding out the power of what makes people tick and how as you as a leader can apply that to make the best out of a high-performing person and therefore become a high-performing organization. And Jeremy, what I have found is by focusing more, the cool people around the world I'm now exposed to that are in that area of expertise. It's amazing when you finally focus in how much the world opens up to you.
Well, it's interesting too, right? Because I find that like it's the quote's been said many times, so it's somewhat cliche, but it's said many times because it's true. And that's when your audience is everyone, it's really no one. And unless you're deciding to communicate to someone, there's nothing for you to build outward and off of. So that's really the thing you have to consider. Like, it's easier to start small and niche than really big and really wide, because you're not reaching anyone. And that's the really the best way to go about it.
It makes so much sense. And again, just from starting out, I'm realizing that right away that that is the way to go. And it's a little freeing also, because I feel like I'm talking to people that are very interested in the thing that I'm jazzed about. And by having that connection, that just gives me energy.
Yeah, because you're actually impacting, you're actually in communication, you're actually reaching people, and you have an ability to grow from there. Not a lot of people do.
I love that. So talk to me about your experiences with kind of people like me. Let's say someone that's a digital immigrant and not a digital native, someone that hasn't podcasted much in their past, whether listening to it or actually doing it, and you're in a leadership position and you do want to get your messaging out. Is there a certain framework that you've got to get somebody to get into? A senior leader, let's say it's a senior executive leader, a CEO that's in their 50s. How do you approach somebody like that?
Well, I guess we'd have to look at it from the standpoint of, are you reaching out to them because they're starting a podcast? Or are you reaching out to them as a guest? Like, what's the viewpoint there?
Well, I would say, like, if a leader's coming to you and says, "Hey, I want to get my message out. Help me do that into the podcast world. That thingamajiggy podcasting thingy. What do I do?" How do you address that?
So I guess it depends on what level of commitment and what level of management you want to have, because you know as much as I do, like, running your own show can take a lot of work.
Yeah,
you have guest booking, you have editing, you have everything around that. So if that's what you want to do and you want to be the one running the interviews, cool. Like, it's been a great personal branding vehicle for me. But the other side of it is, the guest side of it. It's really easy to run a really great guest campaign if you are reaching out to, we've been talking about niching down here, reaching out to the right niches, talking to the right people, and really being a help flow to them on those shows. And when you're doing it even more, like pulling down to what we call story, message, and call to action, tying your personal story into your brand message, or the 3 to 5 key teachable things you want somebody to walk away with, and then the one place you want them to go to an interview. Because so oftentimes you find people will send somebody 27 different places at the end of an interview, and because of that, they don't take any action at all. So if you're going to go as a guest, I really think it's the best kind of, I guess, return for your time, because let's face it, a lot of CEOs and C-suite people are very, very busy. They may not have a time to start a podcast or something like that. So for me, that's kind of the best way to go about it. Find people that are in your niche that you can help, that are kind of shows that you really, really align with. Once again, not going really, really big at the beginning, because you want to make sure you're niching down enough.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Have you found that there's probably a lot of people in the podcast world with a lot of opinions? And
that's not true at all.
And so there's a lot of free advice out there. How have you become successful in this very competitive space of opinions, to where you've been able to, create your own brand, potentially monetize this, and really be known as a thought leader? How did you get there on your own journey?
Being too dumb to know I could fail. Because I think that's one reason. Like, we tell ourselves a lot of stories on why we can't do something. I could never do that because, look at XYZ, they're doing it. Or, that person will never speak to me as a guest because, I'm just not important enough. And honestly, right out of the gate, I took a ton of action. I sent out 3,000 individual LinkedIn messages before, I knew there was a thing called automation. So I actually did it by hand. It took me 8 hours. This was back in 2015, nice. And somehow I didn't get blocked. I don't even know how that happened. But I sent out 3,000 individual LinkedIn messages saying, "Hey, please subscribe to this new show." And I reached out and told them what the purpose is and everything else. I then sent out 700 text messages. That was the number of people I had in my phone at that time. I said, "Hey, I need you to subscribe to this show." So I took a lot of action right out of the gate. But then also I made a list of the top 100 people I admired, and I reached out to them, and I had a pretty darn good, rate of people saying yes to me, because number one, I was using some tools like Hunter.io and different things to make sure I was actually talking to the person I wanted to talk to. And I was telling them about my mission as well, because I feel like if it's mission oriented and if you're also talking about what's in it for them, you have a much better hit rate of them saying yes versus, "Hey, I'm doing another podcast, blah, 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 blah." Like, they get requests like that all the time. So you have to make sure you're going to stand out. So because of that, we were able to grow pretty quickly, and we had 10,000 listens in our first 30 days. As I said, I was too dumb to know I could fail, and took a lot of action right out of the gate. And ever since then, I've been able to build off of that success and interview more cool people and more cool people and more cool people that have really big visions. And, about a year into that whole thing is where the company came from. People are like, "Hey, can you do this for us?" And that's really where Command Your Brand came in. So, like I said, it was just out of the gate. It was too dumb to know I could fail and take action that was big enough. The 10X rule by Grant Cardone was a huge motivator in that whole process.
Oh, wow. Yep. Well, there's something to say about motivation. There's no doubt about that. How did you come up with your name of your podcast, the Create Your Own Life podcast? Was it just that? You were like, "I'm going to create my own life"?
I said those words, but it was more out of angst. I was a teacher right out of college, and my mom ended up having a really bad stroke in 2013 or 2012, sorry. And I ended up like making a giant career leap. I went through a bunch of things that didn't work, and my father at that time was like, "Hey, you have a bachelor's degree, you have a master's degree, you have all this stuff you did, and you're quitting your teaching job. Like, what's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I want to create my own life," and he's like, "Good luck." So like. He's always been a corporate guy.
To a father, yes.
He's always been a corporate guy. He started, the lowest possible position you could start in a company and worked his way all the way up to the VP. So like in his mind, that's how it works. So, and I was just doing something very different than his reality. Now he's one of my biggest supporters. He's super proud of me, and things are really go well in that way. But the name came from like, I want to create my own life. And the response was, good luck with that, buddy.
That is hilarious. Being a father, I can see that instinctually coming out of my mouth too.
Yeah,
that's for sure. So you started your podcast, and one of the things that I've read about you that really helped you was that you study world-class performers.
Yeah.
You took that deliberate action. What were some of the traits that you saw that you were like, okay, these are the building blocks to success?
Well, it's interesting because like really that's a lot of what I've done on the podcast is the people that I've studied that way. But then also like a lot of my reading, I read a lot of biographies and autobiographies. Nice. I read a book called The Great Bridge by David McCullough about the guys that built the Brooklyn Bridge, which was absolutely incredible. And I've learned a lot about people that undertake big things. One is they've had some really big form of adversity in their life, like something they've had to struggle against and push against. And it's, kind of made them tougher than a lot of people. They're able to take a lot more than other people can take. Huh. The other thing is they're a bit eccentric. Like they don't know what no means. They don't know what you can't do that means. And
I love that.
As well, they find this ability to flip from me to we, right? Like they realize that it's not just about them. And when they're operating, helping more than just themselves, they're able to like do some pretty awesome, amazing, big things. But when you're thinking just about yourself and your own survival, like you don't make the best decision for a whole group of people, and you're going to have trouble really making something big.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's interesting. I had a conversation yesterday on a podcast with, Dr. Kevin Snyder. He's a dean within the Penn State University system, and he was talking about the traits required to be a leader in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And as you were talking, I just happened to have show notes over there because he was the last podcast that I did. And here are the 4 core things. And it's very interesting about how you almost named all 4 of those.
Oh, wow.
On world-class performers. So this is his viewpoint on what does it take, future leaders to lead successfully here. Transparency, collaboration, a willingness to fail, and emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting when you were describing that there, you ticked off willingness to fail, and you certainly ticked off collaboration when you were talking about this from I to we, from me to we, and they definitely have to have that level of emotional intelligence. Even though, so what is? Let's look at those 2, I guess, transparency and emotional intelligence, because I think those were the 2 outliers potentially. Do you think when you were saying they were a bit eccentric, only because they didn't know how what no was and everything like that? Do you find that most of these successful people still have a bond? Do they have that emotional intelligence? Can they connect with people very well?
Well, absolutely. They're able to shift their viewpoint. And what I mean is they can actually see things from where other people can see them, so they have a higher level of understanding. And what I mean by that, I guess a really good example of that, right, is like one of the things that's been a skill for me, and it's something I learned, it's not something I knew how to do, is with interviewing people, I'm able to ask questions from a standpoint of what does my audience want to know? And I feel like really good leaders are able to do that. They're able to see the viewpoint someone else is seeing something from, and they're able to consider that then in their decision making. So I feel like that's really, really important. And then in terms of, empathy, like they're able to understand like what effect is what I'm going to create. I think oftentimes people just kind of do some stuff because they want to do it. And then they're like, oh my gosh, now I got to handle all these things that have happened. Why are you mad about this? And why are you thinking about this? But we don't often consider, okay, I'm going to do this thing. What effect is this thing I'm going to create? Like, how will someone receive this? But we don't consider that in our communication. So we create a lot of weird effects. And I think big leaders are able to think of those things when doing things.
Yeah, that's awesome. It always isn't it amazing how well, we actually almost started off this way when you're talking about you feel like you're talking to a single person and not just
Yeah.
over top of them. You know, it's so amazing how many messages do we receive where they're just not talking to you. They're way over your head. You know that they're just messaging the message and it just doesn't resonate.
Oh my gosh,
and that
like
never works.
what part of the country are you in, James?
I am in central Vermont.
Okay, you're in central Vermont. Well, I'm out here in the New York area, so we get a lot of like New York radio commercials, and you hear like some of these. There's one for Empire Casino, and the way they're doing it like the communication doesn't like hit anybody. You're like, hey guys, we could all go to the casino. It's open. Cool. Let's drive there. Like, and I think that like when you hear even a really good message, like you actually feel like you are receiving that message. And in this one,
That's
you're kind of
right.
like, you're like, who is this even written to? This is horrible.
Oh my gosh.
It's so bad. This is the second podcast I've mentioned it on. Anyway.
Note to the casino. They'll be getting calls. They'll be like, you got to change that, man. Yeah, it's so funny. I love the fact one of the biggest things that I've been talking about recently is controlling the narrative about how it's really important. You know, you can start to shape the future by controlling your current narratives and all that stuff, but it's the power of that story, right? It is the right narrative that you have to have, you know, and have a really good friend who's a culture guy, Jim Kerr, and he loves to say, you got to have a vision story. You know, you've got to be able to paint the right story so that people can see it in their head.
Yeah.
You know, we're all humans. So what is, like when you have all of these tidbits that you've been saying, is it mostly from the school of hard knocks? Is it from your perspective truly as a PR marketing type person? Where have you really traveled to say, hey, here's my tool bag. Let me pull some things out here to help spread the wisdom?
Oh gosh, man. I don't feel like it's one thing, right? Like, cause like I've spoken all over America, all over Europe, and you have to kind of like all over South America, and you have to learn how to communicate to different kinds of people. So that's one part of it. But like, I didn't start there. It's, talking to a lot of different people on the podcast has, really taught me a lot and really taught me a lot about communication. But also at the same time, like it is a little bit of hard knocks, man. Like I said, my master's degree is in history. I didn't know anything about business. I've learned a lot of what I've learned by experience and figuring things out and seeing what didn't work. And I honestly feel like what didn't work, we talked about iron sharpening iron today. Like what didn't work was one of my greatest teachers because it taught me what not to do. So I think that's really, really huge because you're like, all right, well, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm not going to let someone else make that mistake again. So you're really, really able to, understand and forecast what's going to happen because of what you've done and what you've experienced.
That makes sense. Where has been your favorite place to travel so far?
So, oh gosh, because there's one just because of one place I went there. This is a really difficult question, man, because now I'm like, I like every place I've been.
Well, you were like Europe, South America, all throughout North America. So where's that one place you're like, man, I love that place?
I can't say there's just one because like Italy was incredible, and I'm a huge ancient history person, so I love everything about Dante. So Florence was incredible. So that was just really cool, and you can buy like handmade leather on the street, and that's just a really cool experience. I went to Vienna. And we went to the Schweizer, which is the largest Biergarten in all of Europe. Yeah, it was incredible. It is the Schweizer. I love saying Schweizer. It's the largest beer garden in Europe. That was just very fun. I also got engaged in Athens, Greece, on a rooftop at sunset, which that's just always a special moment. So travel is a huge part of my life, and it's why we've built our business the way we've built it.
That's awesome. And so you've got to be going a little zonkers right now.
Oh, dude, I was supposed to be in Paris last week and it got canceled. I am going nuts right now.
Yeah, I tell you, I was on the way to Budapest for the.
Oh my gosh, you were in Budapest?
No, I was on the way in 30 days for the European Wine Festival, and it just all canceled. And so there goes that. And guess where I was going to head? I was going to come back home through Vienna. So I would have been to where?
Schweizer. Well, I got to tell you though, if you have you been to Budapest before?
I've not been to Budapest. I'm a traveler too, but it was next on the list.
Budapest is such a beautiful city. We went there, and if you ever go there, a little tip is you can actually get hotel rooms that are on like boat hotels. They call them botels on the Danube. And we
Yeah.
actually like were on a hotel in the Danube right in front of like the Parliament building, which is that like classic photo of Europe you see in every history book. Oh, what an incredible experience.
Buda and Pest.
Yeah, Buda and Pest. They're separated by the Danube River.
That's right. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing how traveling makes you a better person at the end of the day, and it certainly makes you, a world citizen, a global citizen. There's no doubt about that.
It's funny. My wife is Hungarian too, so when we went there, like everybody like thought she was from there, which is the same experience when I went to Wales because I look Welsh. So people are kind of like they use all the way they talk with you there, and you're like, well, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you're like, huh? Yeah, especially Wales. That's what a crazy accent.
Yeah,
that is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I'm a big believer in the power of travel. I think it shapes perspective, and again, from a leadership, we're not going down too far of a rabbit trail because I think this is a leadership lesson that I think travel and world experiences, and I'm a big believer in saying education, training, and experiences are what helps shape you as a leader, and experiences from traveling certainly makes you a better person.
Well, it's because you get the viewpoint of other realities, right? Like,
yes.
And that's the thing is like, I know China's been in the news a lot recently, and like, I can't say much about the government because they have done some pretty rough things in China, but I will say from the standpoint of like understanding the Chinese people, it gave me a much different understanding for them because they were very warm people and everything else. So you understand cultures better. You don't always understand governments because governments and people aren't always the same thing.
Oh, you bet.
But you get such a different understanding from where people are coming from.
I love that. Has it helped you become not only a better person, but has it helped you professionally too?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you're just able to, once again, just network with some incredible people and get a chance to just have this level of understanding, right? Like when you can speak to someone's reality, man, it's so much of a different conversation, and it raises like the affinity level, right? Like you both like each other a lot more if you have a real understanding and a real reality and you have more real conversations.
Absolutely. Have you met the Jeremy of Europe or of South America or of Asia?
I don't know. We were in Budapest. We saw another person look exactly like my wife, which was kind of weird. But no, I have not met the Jeremy of Europe or South America.
And I was just talking about, someone with your success level and basically in the same lanes. If someone has,
I've met people that are way more successful than me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've just traveled a lot. You know what I mean?
You bet. Have you found, we'll stay on international travel for a minute. Is there a certain region globally that podcasting is the thing to do? Is there a place where podcasting is more popular than it is in the States?
And this isn't really from travel because yes, I've been there, but podcasting wasn't really big yet, but it's huge in the UK and Australia right now. And those are two really big countries for podcast listening. Like I studied in the UK in 2009, but like podcasts were kind of barely a thing at that point in time. So they're really, really big in the UK and also Australia.
Interesting. How much do you study due to your work? How much, I'm sure like understanding the analytics and the whole back end and the science behind it. How much are you in tune to that, and how truly important is it?
In terms of like the analytics of the podcast world, or
yes, for the average podcaster, what should they be paying attention to?
Well, I think one, the number of shows in the space now, we hit over 1 million in April. I think that's a really big deal because it shows how much opportunity there is out there. But it also shows like in the grand scheme of things, like 1 million isn't a big number. So there's also a lot of room for a lot of people, which is really, really cool. The other thing is also knowing like the main statistics and main numbers you need to know to rank your show. Like the main thing that Apple Podcasts, as Spotify is kind of growing, but Apple Podcasts is still the bigger one. The main thing they rank people by is their subscriber numbers, but it's not total subscribers. It's your ratio of subscribers to the subscribers you currently have that you've gained in a 24-hour period. So when you can keep that ratio high over time, you're going to, stay in those top charts over time. And then it's kind of like the hierarchy goes down to, number of downloads and then followed by, number of reviews and stuff like that. So when you kind of know those numbers, you can kind of change the way you compete in the game a lot more. And that's why, like, you'll see some shows that don't have huge download numbers hit the top 200 in their category because they've kind of figured out how to keep that ratio of new subscribers to current subscribers high for a long period of time.
That makes sense. And that also counters someone that just goes on this huge campaign of, hey, subscribe here, and then just leaves everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then your kind of growth numbers stay down.
Yep. Oh, that makes sense. So what would be if you were to suggest the number one lesson to learn from podcasting, what would it be?
I'd just say it's the number one life lesson, man. Like the first time you do something, it may not be, the best way, and it's kind of going to get better the more you do it. Like my first podcast failed and didn't even get 100 downloads in 3 months. So, you the first time is going to be a learning experience, and you may hit it off the first time, and that's great. But I think the idea of the big break or the one hit wonder is a myth. I think a lot of times it's the work that you've done to get there. So realize that, hey, it's going to be some work, but if you continue to do it and you continue to stay in it and continue to improve, you're going to get somewhere.
That's awesome. That's great advice. And I'll tell you, like the whole premise of this again is how to be that effective communicator, how to use one of the primary modes of communication in today's world, which is podcasting. And everybody should really consider thinking about this as one of their tools in their leadership toolkit for sure.
Absolutely.
So Jeremy, wrapping up here, what I'll leave you with the last word, I guess. The point of this episode was really to focus our listeners into kind of understanding the power of podcasting and getting to know you a little bit more and all of that. And so I'd love for you to kind of just take us out with a little bit more of Brother Iron, Sister Steel knowledge.
Well, I do think that, and it's funny because this isn't even a podcasting thing, but one of the best books I ever read is a book called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And I think I'm 33, so I think the millennial generation like really stinks at the idea of like, I'm going to go follow my passion and that's what I'm going to do in my life. And it's like, yeah, okay, buddy, good luck with that. I think the actual thing, and this Cal talks about in the book, is you find something you're good at. And you continue to get better at it and better at it and better at it. And it becomes effortless. And that's when the passion comes in. So don't think you always have to follow your passion. Find something you're good at it, become the best at it. And then you're going to find the passion follow.
Yeah, Jeremy, such great advice. I know when we first started talking and I said I was in the military and you thanked me for my service. And one of the things when somebody says that, I say it's my honor because I never worked a day in my life. And that advice that you just gave resonates with me because I found my passion to serve the nation, and it was just effortless. And when everybody finds that in their life, it is truly a freeing event.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jeremy, thanks for your time. We really appreciate your knowledge and your humor. And where is it again that we'll all go visit in Vienna?
No, Schweizerhaus.
Yeah, see, I'd want to leave it that way. That's awesome. Thanks, Jeremy.
This is the Schweizerhaus. This is the largest beer garden in all of Europe. Yeah.
We're all going now. Jeremy, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Awesome. Thanks for joining our leadership movement this week. Talking to Ryan today about how we can focus podcasting into a form of communication that outperforms all other media, and how this is a lesson in effective leadership was educational, to say the least. Don't forget our show notes are posted on the website with key leader takeaways, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend so we can continue to build the tribe. Until next time, remember that iron sharpens iron. Make yourself and others around you better every single day.